All right. So the context of the ayah, here we go. وَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ شِقَاقَ بَيْنِهِمَا فَابْعَثُوا حَكَمًا مِنْ أَهْلِهِ. So first it was basically talking about the relationship between husband and wife in case of dispute. Of course, it puts in the foundation of qawama, how the structure and the dynamic of at least who's in control, who's in charge, how to deal with different dispute, at least at a marital level. And then it continues to basically put in the different scenarios that might happen in case of dispute. At times, the case of dispute can be that the woman is basically in this first scenario. There is another scenario that we'll be talking about it towards the end of Surah Nisa, in case or in situations where the man is the one that is actually committing nushuz, not the woman. Okay, so when it's the man that's committing nushuz, when it's the man that is the perpetrator and not the woman that is the perpetrator. So nushuz is basically a perpetrator or perpetration. All right. The second scenario is if there isn't necessarily a specific perpetrator. In other words, it's that area where you can have differences of readings to the case, and we can have different scenarios in where is this really the person that's perpetrating? But sometimes things can actually be somewhat ambiguous, and it's not a very fine thing where you could identify who really is the perpetrator. It becomes more of a dispute. And this is important to mention, because it often happens that people would consider, if there is a dispute, that one is right and the other is wrong. But there are situations where it is not necessarily that clear, where it's a particular person that is right and wrong. Some things can actually carry some, let me say, fine line that can have different interpretations, or at least different narratives to the story. And that's why don't be too fast to judge when we would have a marital dispute or any, let's call it family tension, family problem. Don't always judge, and especially the younger generation. We're usually fast, not we, because I'm not young anymore, but all right. But the younger generation tends to usually want to put their say on a certain scenario and think that that is what's going to give them weight and some form of authority, and where I'm going to judge in this matter, and then without them recognizing that you're going to make a lot of mistakes when you don't always, or you don't keep in mind that there are some times where no one is the perpetrator, that each may have his or her narrative, and don't be fast in wanting to make a judgment. Take your time to learn at least the most important thing, especially when you're not asked to be the judge on the case, or at least when you're not qualified to be the judge on the case. Take your time to learn the most important thing from reading and hearing people's problems or disputes, the least to say, is that take the time to learn the wisdom behind what leads to people probably having tensions, disagreements, or probably just maybe some form of not getting along. How do we anticipate not getting in these kind of problems before they happen? That's the most important wisdom that we can learn from hearing people's disputes, from hearing people's problems. So in the situations where there is shiqaq, we talked about the suggestion in the Quran is to have a hakam where it's the person to basically make a judgment or a reconciliation in the case, to bring about the misunderstanding between the two people in a way where brings about at least a better communication. That's very important to learn, because sometimes someone, even if they're less educated, even if they might not have all the information that you might have. They can have the skill of communication. The skill of communication is not necessarily related to education. Some people just have the skill to reach out to the hearts, can have the skill to bring about a common ground, can have the skill to help others, let me say, understand at their level a certain misunderstanding or a certain miscommunication in situations. And that's why when you look at حكم من أهله وحكم من أهلها, in order to bring about, to make sure that the whole dispute is basically seen by somebody that is not influenced by either or, in other words, or by either opinion, by someone that listens to both sides, by someone that is qualified to basically make a judgment, or not necessarily a judgment, but at least to bring about some form of either. They can bring about, number one, which is to decide on whether they want to bring about a reconciliation, in other words, make the marriage work out on probably certain conditions. Maybe to tell her, well, usually, I'll tell you, most disputes happen. Please pay attention to this one, ladies. Most disputes, and even men, if they're listening, one of the marriage killers is bringing about some mistake or some shortcoming, whether her or him, in every single time we would get in a dispute. Remember such and such day you did this. Remember such and such day you did this. And constantly bringing it up. It will shorten your life. It will be nothing but bragging. It will be brought again and again and again. You had brought it up. You brought this subject so many times. Isn't it about enough? Although many times someone might say, well, that's because that subject was never resolved. Yeah, that's why it's being brought up again. Sometimes it's not an issue of whether it was resolved or not. Some mistakes, there's no way that you can resolve it to probably maybe more than an apology. And some mistakes or shortcomings, it's not an issue of a mistake, or sometimes it's a misunderstanding. And then if you were to bring it back up again, maybe you're also not listening. You want others to listen. Maybe you too are not listening to yourself and are not listening to the situation. So that's why sometimes people will just have nothing but a monologue, no dialogue. One is only hearing themselves and they want others to listen to them and they don't want to hear the other person. That's where the help of a third or a fourth party can come in to be in that assistance to bring about a better communication, to finalize this shiqaq, this dispute, or at least this sharh, which basically means a tear, So at the end of the day is that it's not enough to just bring about a hakam. The hakam, number one, can have the power of attorney to bring about a communication, bring about a somewhat of a clarification between the two parties. Scholars had differences of opinions on whether these people that are basically the power of attorneys, or at least these people that are supposed to be speaking on the behalf as advocating for each and every single person. Person A is advocating for the wife, person B is advocating for the husband, or at least not necessarily advocating per se, but at least sounding or understanding the dispute in order to bring about a reconciliation. Or scholars had differences of opinions on whether they also had the power to bring about a resolution. That's a huge step. Because if we're talking about these power of attorneys / these people assigned to speak on their behalf, on whether they can come about with an agreement to bring about a resolution that actually means a divorce. Question 2 comes in. If these two figures, let's call them that way, were going to be deciding that the best solution to this marriage is a resolution/divorce? Can and do they have to basically take the permission from the husband and the wife to make a resolution? That's a very important thing. The scholars that said, listen to this, the scholars that said that such a hakam is nothing but a power of attorney, they said no, they do not have the authority to make a resolution. They can only have the power to make a communication or some form of building bridges of communication. Why? Because they said the power of attorney is only supposed to be acting based on the person that hired them or that basically assigned them to be the power of attorneys. In other words, they don't have the authority to act against their will. The second group of scholars that said that no, they can have the power to do a marriage resolution. They said because this person is not a power of attorney per se, but this person is basically called in the ayah as a hakam, not a power of attorney, not a wakil, but a hakam, to mean that they are judges. And the judge would not basically act as to what the person, whether it's the plaintiff or whether it's the other person, they don't act based on their will, but the hakam acts based on what they see is necessary for the situation. Are you guys seeing the dispute here? And this is important. Look at that. It's how do they see? The first group saw the word hakam as to actually be a metaphor for power of attorney. The second group said that no, this is literally a person acting as a judge to make the final statement in finalizing the dispute. Both opinions actually have a good evidence and a good backup. You see the word here? A good evidence and a good backup. But it's really important when you want to study fiqh that you just don't take the statement without seeing the words themselves and how they looked into these words. Many times people will say, well, fiqh, and they would just think of it as something that is very complex and that's it. They don't recognize that, no, these scholars were so smart and so considerate of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that they wanted to take every single word seriously. So the scholars, when they had a dispute or at least a differences of opinion on whether they can bring about a resolution or whether they don't have the power to bring about a resolution, it was just the same exact word. And then they had two differences of opinions because of just one particular word. Now let's continue. And then of course, then it takes us into, well, if we're talking about marital problems, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lays out that any problem, the most important thing to bring about not only a solution to problems, but also the dynamic in how we relate to one another. The dynamic, yes, justice is important, but justice cannot happen if the person's foundation of identifying justice and identifying who identifies ethics, who identifies justice, if it isn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore, the foundation of ethics, the foundation of justice, the foundation of truth is not starting with you as a human being, because you cannot whatsoever be completely unbiased. You will have different influences that can influence your perspective, influence the way you judge the things around you. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because people can go into shiqaq, because it's so easy to create a narrative of nushuz, etc., that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was laying out the foundation of what makes justice, what makes ethics, what makes a stable family, a stable marriage, a stable community. It really starts with worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not worshiping yourself, and certainly not worshiping interest. Because once you worship your own interests, that's when you become a narcissist. Those that would feed your interest, those that would give your interest at least its backup, you would see them as deserving some form of praise, some form of a backup, because to you, your interest is your center. Somebody feeds your interest, you would basically act in good ways with them. That's a narcissist. A Muslim cannot be a narcissist. A Muslim considers that worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is on top of every man, is on top of every woman. Therefore, the center is not your interest, but the center is al-ubudiyya lillah, is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And of course, al-ubudiyya lillah would always consist of two things. Number one, is it tahliyah or tahliyah? Number two, is it tahliyah? What is it tahliyah and what is it tahliyah? Let's look at it tahliyah and it tahliyah. So it tahliyah would really mean that you are taking something out. In other words, you are denying or you are abandoning one thing. A tahliyah is that you are affirming something. Although they may look like two same words, but this one has the kha and this one has the ha. Takhliyah and tahliyah. La ilah is takhliyah. What is takhliyah? Abandoning. No God. Abandoning what? That there is any God out there. That's a tahliyah. A tahliyah is to affirm and you bring about not only an affirmation, but also a confirmation of something. And this is a tahliyah, where, yes, I'm abandoning and denying that there is an existence of any God to be worshipped, but then that's not enough. But there's also the affirmation that there's only one God Almighty worthy of worship. So that's a tahliyah, and that's a tahliyah right there. Now, it's really important to mention that al-ibadah is actually consisting of three things. Number one, ibadatullah subhanahu wa ta'ala consists of believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as the only deity. Number two, believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as the only deity to be worshipped. And number three, affirming and believing in the names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that one can contain names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that relate to his description as the Almighty, that relate to him Almighty. And number two, the names and attributes that contain or at least the attributes that relate to describing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's actions. So one is relating to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in himself, in understanding, well, who is God? Yes, you don't have an image of God. Yes, you don't have some kind of an idol of God, but you recognize that the Lord Almighty is one. He is the last. He is the Almighty. He is the magnificent. You recognize certain things about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number two, how do I recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Through what? If I don't see God, how do I recognize God if I don't see God? So that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you 99 different names to recognize the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the authority of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number three, the dominion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number four, the mercy and the forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And number five, which is extremely important, how the Lord Almighty encompasses all the different powers, all the different forces in the world before even they had existed. So the Lord Almighty encompasses dominion, encompasses the power, encompasses the ownership, encompasses the forgiveness, and definitely encompasses what? Authority, dominion. We talked about ownership, forgiveness, and of course, mercy. This is important. So those are the names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, when you look at these three parts of ibadah, this is what is called tawheed. This is what is called tawheed. So a Muslim would, one, believe in the existence of one God alone, two, tawheed al-ibadah, in where worshipping only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and three, believing that only the names and attributes, only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is attributed and described with these actions, and that no one else shares this description with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're only to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We leave it at that. Do we necessarily believe that these names in any way to be metaphorical? We would not believe that these names are to be metaphorical. We would leave it as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had described himself. So if you were to say, Yadullahi fawqa aydihim, we're not going to say, well, this is a metaphor to actually mean yad, in where it's meaning, for example, maybe power or etc. We just leave it as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had described himself. So why leave it at that? Why not even give more of that? Now, it's important to mention that you did have, I would say, this is on a side, definitely, and I know this portion is going to be, I would say, the piece, well, you will have many would take it out of context, and no matter what you say, you're going to be considered a mubtadi'ah. Listen to this. I'm just going to lay out one thing in order to help us understand why we would find a lot of times different Muslim groups really at war with one another because of this that we're going to say. Number one is that when it comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is beyond nature. And because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is beyond nature, to use any form of understanding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala based on your understanding of nature is definitely going to be within tajseem. What is tajseem? Tajseem is called, an English long word, anthropomorphization. I know, I don't even know how to spell it, so don't ask me. Anthropomorphization. What is that? Anthropomorphization. Spell it as you want. Don't worry, I will look at your spelling because I'll make a mistake myself. All right. What is anthropomorphization? Anthropomorphization is basically when you would describe God with human features. So if you're going to describe God based on human features, you are falling in anthropomorphization or tajseem. Now, the thing is that whether al-Ash'ari or even Ahl al-Hadith, many times they both believe that anthropomorphization is what actually led to paganism. Pay attention. Why paganism? Well, paganism, it actually started with the idea that God is basically part of everything, that God is, since he is everywhere, he is part of everything, then therefore you and I can also be part of God. Trees can be part of God. Cows can be part of God. That's paganism. So they took everything as gods, not with an apostrophe S. but as gods later on, because they considered that God is everywhere. Well, since he's everywhere, does that mean that he becomes part of everything? And that's a very dangerous concept. Now, both Ash'ari and even Ahl al-Hadith or slash Salafiyin, they would both agree that tajseem or anthropomorphization is a dangerous thing to basically get involved in or to consider. Why? Because that's going to lead you into nothing but going into paganism without you recognizing. But here's one thing. The first group, they considered that, well, if I am to say that God is not everywhere, but God is fis sama, then that would actually mean you had considered, or at least confined Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a particular place. The second group said, well, if you were to say that God is everywhere, the first group, they said that is actually to consider that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in a particular place. Then they both agreed that you don't want to confine Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a particular place because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is وَلَا يُحِطُونَ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنْ عِلْمِهِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cannot whatsoever be confined, not in his ilm, and certainly not in place and not in space. Because the second that you confine Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be within a space or within a place, that actually means you limited Allah. The second that you limited Allah, then that actually means you had taken away a very important piece of the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is Al. What is Al? Remember, when we say As-Sami', Al-Basir, Al-Awwal, Al-Akhir, that Al actually means more than just identifying something. It could also mean to encompass at large. You see it? There are two L's. Remember, there's an Al, Al-Ahdiyya, and there's another Al, Al-Istighraqiyya. What is Al, Al-Ahdiyya? Give me the bag. You understand that I'm talking about a particular bag. That is the Al, the particular Al. Give me the bags. In English, if I were to say the bags, you would understand al-istighraqiyya by the plural bags following the identifying article the. You would understand that I'm actually asking you to give me each and every single bag in this room. What is that? That's an inclusive Al. There's a particularizing Al and there's an inclusive Al. Is everybody with me? Who's sleeping? An inclusive Al or a particularizing Al? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he says As-Sami', Al-Basir, that means he is beyond and certainly containing all the ability to hear each and every lowest sound, from the sound that you cannot hear with the lowest sound that even the decibels might not actually pick up, to the loudest sound that even you cannot hear. Are you able to hear the sun, and are you able to hear the sounds up there? No, you're not, but the Lord Almighty can. Are you able to hear the sounds that are probably of a crawling ant? No, you're not. The sounds of so many different sounds that surround you? No, you're not. You're able to hear a certain decibel, and it depends on your age and it depends on your health. Your ears will only be capable of picking up a certain decibel in sound. Now, that's where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He tells us that He is as-Sami' al-Basir, this is in order to tell us that He is beyond capacity. He is beyond what you identify as capacity. He is beyond what you identify as space. He is beyond and what you identify as place, space, place, and time. And that's why He's al-awwal and He's al-akhir. He's the beginning and He's the last. And when also He is beyond what you consider as force/energy. To you, an energy is basically going to be, whether you're talking about studying the laws of power and energy, whether we're talking about a certain force, whether you're talking about based on the unit of Newton or based on the Newton of the unit of maybe different forces, voltage or whatever it is, all these ampere, whatever it is, all these different units, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is beyond any unit. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is beyond any power whatsoever to actually be studied. That's why He is al-Qawi and He is as-Sami'. He is al-Basir, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ended that ayah with saying, "Laysa kamithlihi shay." There's nothing that is comparable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. "Laysa kamithlihi shay" to mean nothing of what was created. Not in force, not in power, not in space, not in place, not in time, not in anything that is comparable. Now, both the Ash'ari and even the Salafiyya or even the other groups, they would say, well, we don't want to practice anthropomorphization. But then they went into different ways of, well, how do we actually go out of not practicing this? Then they basically went into these disputes, and how do we actually do that? Is this anthropomorphization? Is that anthropomorphization? Are we here doing tajseem? What are we really doing? Now, it's important. The easiest way is that when it comes to relating and speaking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ta'zeem and glorifying the Lord Almighty should be number one, al-asas, should be the base. Number two, recognizing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with the glorification of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that is the basis in where once we're dealing with the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we don't base it based on our limited minds. We keep in mind that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even in Surah Shura, basically told us that the laws of duality, what is that? خَلَقَ لَكُم مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا وَمِنَ الْأَنْعَامِ أَزْوَاجًا يَذْرَأُكُمْ فِيهِ. Told you, whether we're talking about the law of duality or whether we're talking about the different laws within creation, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. Don't apply the laws that you know about space, place, physics, etc. Don't apply it on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Don't apply. That is tawheed. Don't apply it on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When it comes to understanding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you cannot confine Him in space. You cannot confine Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in time. And you cannot confine Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to being part of anything whatsoever, because that is the basis of shirk. That's the basis of shirk. So this is tawheed in a nutshell. Tawheed in a nutshell, trying to simplify it. Once you understand this one, you will basically understand all the books of tawheed, al-Tahawiyya, and of course, the different books of tawheed. That's it. That's it. If we limit it at that, it's really sad to see that a lot of books of Aqeedah would go in so much detail in speaking about a lot of the different disputes that happened throughout history, at least in a certain era within the Muslim period. Please pay attention to this one. This is important. There were throughout history a number of different influences, even within the Muslim discourse. You had Greek influences, you had the Persian influences. And what I mean by influences, I'm talking about the discourse, I'm talking about the conversation, I'm talking about the different interpretations that influence the Muslim mind. Such influences, unfortunately, in history, they took a large proportion of dispute and a lot of energy. Unfortunately, we do have a lot of Muslim groups that spend days, hours, and time reviving such disputes, which was really a mistake in Muslim history. It was a mistake in Muslim history. And I'll repeat it again and again. To adopt a Greek, Persian, and the list goes on with different influences, and then get into the same feudal dispute that really led to wasting the Muslim energy and the Muslim power as well. Unfortunately, we have many that are very blind in following the manhaj, the way, the method, the legacy of the Prophet ﷺ. The Sahaba didn't need to go into all these disputes in Tawheed. It was really simple. It was simple to understand. It was simple to explain. It didn't need all these classes in bringing about a simple understanding of Tawheed. It was very simple. And to revive all the different disputes in history and talk about it now when it's not even a topic now. Who's talking about Khalq al-Quran? Who's talking about the Quran and whether it was created or not? Talking about it now is a really nothing but a waste of energy for the Muslim community, where it is facing right now tides, dangerous tides in atheism, dangerous tides coming from postmodernism, feminism, coming from LGBT, coming from many Muslims coming in with a lot of miscommunication or even misconceptions. To revive past misconceptions is definitely the last thing we want as an ummah. Reviving previous misconceptions that were already long time solved and talked about. And Ahmed ibn Hanbal went into prison for such misconceptions, to talk about it again and again. And consider that, oh, I'm teaching Tawheed. You're not teaching Tawheed. You're bringing in a misconception and not taking it away. If a misconception had long died, kabbir 4 takbirs, salat al-janazah, and done. Now, even the minhaj of Ibn Taymiyyah, he didn't continue just talking about past things. Even minhaj Ibn Taymiyyah, or even the legacy, it was to actually face the contemporary issues of their time. Same thing. The contemporary issues of our time are atheism, postmodernism, are all these different philosophies that are a result of atheism and postmodernism and feminism and LGBT and all of that. Those are our modern issues. To revive past misconceptions is nothing but naive, myopic, and a rare, and I would say, sorry, not a rare, but a narrow vision, and lacking wisdom. Lacking wisdom. For those that would be many times not recognizing that they're actually part of Tawheed classes or part of those classes and end up really engaged in nothing but ostracizing and dividing the ummah, thinking that I'm basically here believing in Islam and everyone else is nothing but a mubtada'. Sorry, but you had created what is even worse, which is bringing in a division in the ummah. If you think that that's a bid'ah, the worst bid'ah is to divide the ummah. The worst bid'ah is to just think of yourself as somehow having the only Islamic interpretation and everyone else is nothing but a mubtada', and dealing and even misunderstanding the word mubtada', because mubtada', it was a word that even the scholars back then had used in order to stay away from takfir. You know what takfir is? Takfir simply means you're regarding that person as kafir. So because they understood how dangerous such word is of accusing somebody of committing takfir, they used another word of saying mubtada'. But what we're seeing many do right now is not recognizing that mubtada' does not mean kafir, but they treat the word as nothing but a synonym to kafir. The word mubtada' right now is nothing but a mukaffir right now. Right now, many are using this form of, I'm going to call you mubtada', and really you're acting not as if you had regarded that person as a mubtada' / innovator, but you had dealt with that person as if they were kafir. And certainly, that's not the intention of all those ulama. You had great ulama that were ash'ara and that actually believed in certain different things in Aqeedah, at least in terms of understanding the names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that may be really exactly like al-ash'ara or may not be on that, but we will still consider that they were great scholars. Nawawi, al-Haythami, Ibn Hajar, and al-Qurtubi, al-Zamakhshari, Mu'tazili. You've got a lot of different great scholars. You got a lot of different great scholars. Learn how to have adab with these great scholars, even if we may consider that their interpretation in terms of Aqeedah may not necessarily be as what you regard as what Salaf would say. Learn how to have adab. Most of those that don't have adab with these scholars, sorry, but have shallow ilm. The only ones to respect and appreciate ilm and the ulama are the ones that really know how far and vast that ilm is. And when they recognize these scholars and the vastness of the depth of their ilm, that's when they would recognize that we cannot just abandon and discredit their ilm by saying, mubtada', calm down, have adab. Calm down and have adab. Calm down and literally get an education. Say it that way. Get an education. Once you want to call Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani an Ash'ari, when you do, if you didn't read Fath al-Bari, I dare you to actually read just one mujallad. You know what? Forget one mujallad. A couple of pages and understand what it's even saying. Couple of pages. You're seeing people literally not talabat ilm, but barely understood and learned Islam. Right away, they're coming at you and telling you, mubtada', dangerous. And it's like, calm down. Go and learn. Go and get an education. Dare you to go and read one of Fath al-Bari's, a couple of pages. Fath al-Bari, we're reading Nawawi. These people had spent all their time and all their energy for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be disregarded. Mubtada'. Get an education if you need. Respecting al-ulama is part of respecting the ilm, the legacy, the love that they had for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that they had for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what it means to respect al-ulama. It's not because of their figures, but it's the light that they carry. It's the light that they carry. It's not them as a human being. They're human as human can be. But the effort that they had put in to bring about such ilm to light, that is what we would give respect for. Needed to comment on that because I would often see, and I know this quote, it's going to be probably, once I would get into probably one day actually my words, I'm gonna be called mubtadi'a regardless. Doesn't matter to me. Doesn't matter. I'll say what is haqq. I'll say what is haqq. You can call me mubtadi'a. Doesn't matter to me. It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that labels, not people. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that labels. Our marja, our reference is al-Quran wa sunnah. Tawheed. We call Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We name Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as He had named Himself. Enough. I would recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as He had mentioned in the Quran. Enough. I would recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's names and attributes as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had described Himself. Enough. To go into details and overthink when my mind is limited to overthink of something that I cannot encompass whatsoever. I don't have the tools to measure, to weigh, to use any type of a unit. I'll just leave it as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. There's nothing like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Get it from there. وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. Attributes are to be confirmed. You don't deny them because you don't understand them. And you affirm and you confirm that yes, He is still a Samir. He is still the all-hearing, all-seeing. I'll leave it at that. All right, let's continue. And then, of course, when we're speaking, let's see, I'm going to have Noura. She's causing trouble always, right? You guys are going to see her tomorrow, inshallah. Yeah, Noura. Yeah, stay tuned. She's the person behind gemsoflight. Just keep it a secret. Yeah. So join us tomorrow. You'll see her, inshallah. All right. وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. When we're talking about, of course, we went into the foundation, the orbit foundation, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being the center. Got the walidain, the parents. We've got then, of course, the different relatives, and that's, of course, the social construct, all right? And then we go into the different areas on where we're talking about the needs. So this is talking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is talking about your social construct. Here we go, the parents, then the relatives, and then of course the need construct, the community, and those that would be vulnerable, whether we're talking about the orphans or whether we're talking about those that are in need. And then we talk about the third orbit, which basically is in proximity, and we talked about the details of that. All right. And then, of course, those that might actually come across, you might come across somebody that is Ibn Sabil, somebody that is stranded, basically, doesn't have money, ended up, even though they do have money back home, but they're stranded right now. So then also, مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ, that it's another vulnerable person, which basically is the slaves, right? إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُحِبُّ مَنْ كَانَ مُخْتَالًا فَخُورًا. Why all of this? Why إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُحِبُّ مَنْ كَانَ مُخْتَالًا فَخُورًا? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was laying this out. Listen to this. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُحِبُّ مَنْ كَانَ مُخْتَالًا فَخُورًا. because it started out with laying out two things. Let's look at these 2 points. This is wa'budullah, to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not like the person that is mukhtal. What is al-mukhtal? Al-mukhtal is a person that basically puts themselves at the center. That's al-mukhtal. They're so impressed with themselves. They're the smartest. They're the most handsome, prettiest. They deserve everything. At the center of everything. That's al-mukhtal. Al-mukhtal, it's a Quranic word for what? Narcissist. Allah alayki, good job. It's the Quranic term for a narcissist. Exactly. Love this girl. Smart. Love this girl. Exactly. So the Quran tells you if you are a narcissist and where you've got all the pride, you consider yourself at the center and you consider that your interests are the center of the world. And if somebody is not contributing to your interests, that they should be ostracized, basically become your victim, then in that situation, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you that that's the person that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dislikes them. That's another way of saying that that person, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dislikes you, then you had then sentenced yourself to basically being ostracized by Allah. You ostracize others because they're not contributing to your interest. Well, wait till Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sentences you that you would actually not be at Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's place of interest. In fiqh, a rule in the chapter of fiqh al-uqubat. What is fiqh al-uqubat? The fiqh of criminal law. The fiqh of criminal law. What is the fiqh of criminal law? You know, criminal laws, they've got, whether it's ta'zir, whether it's hudud, qisas, all these different types of criminal law. There are a couple qawa'id fiqhiyya. What is qawa'id fiqhiyya? Basically legal maxims. A couple. One of them is that a punishment actually comes from the same wrongdoing. The punishment comes from the same wrongdoing, at least from its kind. So therefore, if a person were to steal, we would deal with their hand. They killed, we would basically do the same thing to them. The same type. Okay? Now, that's where if the person's transgression was not worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but worshiping their interest, then when these people consider that their interest is the center, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would consider that they are not the center of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In other words, if they wanted healing, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not even look at their dua and request for healing. You know what? You deal with yourself. Let's see how much you can actually survive without Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being your place of interest. Number 2 is that, as an example, when we're talking about not only treatment, rizq, you name your need. If the person considers that their need is the center and not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they'll end up they'll end up being responsible to handle their needs. And that's why they end up really in search of more and more of people to give them their need, or at least they end up in search of more victims. Why? Because they end up in search, and that's why narcissists, they will continue searching for more victims. Why do they continue searching for more victims? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had isolated them from His love. isolated them, so they become isolated by their actions. Their actions were really to regard themselves as the center. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took them out of his center. So they end up always in search of those, instead of turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they always end up search of more and more victims. And once they end up in search of more and more victims, by the end of their life, they'll be hated and hated and hated. They'll be hated. And they'll eventually, they will go, in the beginning, it might be to give them maybe support in different ways, but then they end up and can end up in even killing their own victims, because they would regard that they were the center. They were in such worship, ibadah for themselves, that they would consider that there is no principle that they would abide by, but the principle is one, is that they are the ones that identify who deserves to live, who deserves to die, and who basically deserves to not have rizq, because they were worshipping themselves. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لا يدخل الجنة, the Prophet says, لا يدخل الجنة من كان في قلبه مثقال ذرة من كبر. A person that has even one iota of pride would never enter Jannah. Even one iota, even the smallest amount of pride. Why have pride when you need to recognize that if it's your intelligence, it's really a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not you. If it's your money, it's really rizq from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not you. It's an effort that you made. You just put a small effort, but a rizq is really controlled by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It goes back to the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, believing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-Raziq, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-Shafi, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-Mu'ti, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that is al-Nasir. He's the one that gives victory. He's the one that gives. He's the one that gives the provision. He's the one that is behind all the force that you would see around you. So instead of attributing it to yourself, attribute it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All right. الَّذِينَ يَبْخَلُونَ وَيَأْمُرُونَ النَّاسَ بِالْبُخْلِ. What is al-bukhl? Those that, of course, let's see the ayah. الَّذِينَ يَبْخَلُونَ. So what is that related to this? Well, those that would consider themselves as the center, they end up living in bukhl. What is al-bukhl? Al-bukhl actually means to be greedy, stingy. Well, here's one thing. Stinginess is not only in wealth. Stinginess can also be in effort. That person. That's why we would ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-ajzi wal-kasal. Al-ajz and al-kasal. Al-ajz, we would make the dua, Ya Allah, we seek refuge in you from al-ajz. Al-ajz is physical disability. Al-kasal is laziness. Why laziness? Laziness, you've got the physical ability, but you don't have the inner motivation. Al-ajzi wal-kasal. Some may not see, and that's why you would see people that don't have any arms, legs, etc., but they're working. And the problem is not necessarily in the ability. The problem really starts with having the inner will. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us both the potential, the ability, and also give us the motivation, the will to do. Al-ajz and al-kasal. And to give us, to keep us away from, we would seek refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from al-jubn wal-bukhl. Al-jubn, what is al-jubn? Al-jubn is not cheese. Okay? Because in Arabic, al-jubn can also mean cheese. Okay? I know cheese. You guys like cheese? No? Oh, I'm a cheese lover. Yeah. What?
Watermelon and cheese.
Watermelon? No, no, no. Yeah, I know Palestinians love watermelon cheese, not me. Not me. I'm actually into all different kinds of cheeses, except blue cheese. There's no way that I'm going to like blue cheese. That stuff is rotten. Why on earth would you eat it? But anyhow, it's somebody's taste. But you can eat it. It's not haram. All right, let's go back to our al-jubn. Okay. Seeking refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from al-jubn. Why al-jubn? What is al-jubn? Al-jubn is basically cowardice. From being a coward. Why? The only reason why you would actually be a brave person is only when you recognize the consequences of what you fear. And therefore, you minimize the fear that probably is seen by many, and then you go for a higher and a more noble consequence, even if that might cost you your life, your wealth, or even cost you all that you have. That's al-hazima. Al-hazima is when you're willing to sacrifice everything for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's principle, whatever it takes. Look at the people in Gaza. Like, why on earth would you fight? Well, you want to get out of Gaza? We're like, no, we're going to stay here. They can kill us. It's okay. They can kill us. We'll stay here. We're not leaving. What don't you? It's like, yeah, I know people, different countries collaborated with Israel in order to go for a plan of probably getting the gas underneath Gaza, whatever it is. But we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that gives rizq. They can shut down the water, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives the water from up there. No one can stop it. They can rain us with phosphorus bombs, but we know, and phosphorus missiles, but we know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that gives life and death, not Israel. They can turn off the electricity, but we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that gives the energy, not them. Not them. This is al-Iman. This is al-Iman. This is unprecedented, to be honest. This is unprecedented. And to interview many as if they were really reading on the same board of Iman, this is unprecedented, to be honest. And I'm very optimistic that al-Ummah is on khair. Al-Ummah is on khair. To really be that courageous, despite all the warmongering, all the fear that is instilled inside their hearts, but they're minimizing the fear because they want to go for a shahada. They want to go for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They want to go for the great legacy of the Anbiya and the Prophets. This is, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give them a nasr. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give them the victory. This is unprecedented, really. This is only heard of long time ago. This is only heard of in the books of Seerah, the books of Tariq. This is unprecedented. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah, will give them the victory. Allahumma ameen. So when we look at seeking refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from al-jubn and al-bukhl, al-bukhl, stinginess, whether it's putting in effort or whether it's putting in wealth. So here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, those that would order yabkhalun, well, they would be stingy, and they would order others of being stingy. In other words, not putting effort, not putting wealth, etc. Well, they want to live by that stinginess. Why are they ordering others? Why are they ordering others? Because they want everyone else to endorse their wrongdoing as if it was being smart, intelligent, wise, and it was the right thing to do. Listen to this. That's why I want you to look at this. Picture this. The most important civilization, ancient civilization that we know of is which one? Egyptian. To the point, it's a whole field of study, Egyptology. Egyptology. But here's one thing. Did the Pharaoh contribute to making this civilization? Absolutely. There's no doubt about that. In other words, in today's standards, the Pharaoh was an excellent leader. In today's standards, he was the one that brought Egypt modernity. He was the one that gave civilization. He was the one that actually contributed to bring about a successful nation. But the Quran tells you, you're reading it wrong. The Quran tells you that was not the most successful civilization. That was actually the worst civilization. That's why the Quran would emphasize the pharaohs and what they had believed and all the different things, and where the Quran emphasizes it 125 different times, as Prophet Musa alayhi salam mentioned of his challenge with the Pharaoh and the injustice that it was actually responsible of. The Quran tells you, don't take the narrow narrative in looking at modernity, that it is civilization. Modernity in contributing to make pyramids and making science is one side. Do not be myopic in how you understand and define civilization. Quran tells us that no, it is one, the center that you use in order to identify civilization. Because civilization, if it is just working on building rocks, pyramids, skyscrapers, whatever it is, but then the inside of it is based on the worship of the Pharaoh or the worship of interest and human beings, then that is not a civilization. That is nothing but a jahiliyyah. It is going to be carrying within it nothing but injustice that may not be visual to many. It is the basis of injustice. So Islam tells us, and these people, these narcissist people, will use different methods in order to manipulate you, in order to for you not to recognize their manipulation, not to recognize that you're actually working for their interest. They will use a manipulation. Not only would they be stingy, but they would actually order you to do exactly the same because they don't want to feel guilty. So they'll basically include you in the same type of behavior. So be careful. That's the same game that a lot of the lobbies are playing. They don't want to just basically practice their aberration by themselves. No, they want to make sure that you too are practicing it just like them. Not only do they want to be inclusive, but they want to make sure that no, we would be the ones to be identified, to be the ones to have the right to identify what we want ethics to be identified in. We want to be the ones to identify. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that what makes justice, what makes civilization, is not the centricity of the individual, but is the centricity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not the centricity, not a husband, and certainly not a human being, and certainly not people, and certainly not money and capitalism and all of that. No, It's the centricity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If that centricity is not based on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then that is not a civilization, but that is carrying within it all the injustices, in where they would basically start manipulating and wanting others to do exactly what they would do in order to hide behind all their actions and make it seem as if it was smart, intelligent, and it was ethical. It was the right thing to do. That it's ethical. You dare speak against the LGBT, you will be accused of committing something unethical, which is lacking tolerance, which is being homophobic, and the list goes on and on. You dare speak against Israel, we're going to accuse you of being anti-Semitic. We've got right there just the right label to make you afraid and appear as if you are not containing whatsoever any justice, any ethics. So what they would do, يَأْمُرُونَ النَّاسَ بِالْبُخْلِ, they want to manipulate others that they're doing the right thing. وَيَكْتُمُونَ مَا آتَاهُمُ اللَّهُ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ, and they would conceal the truth about what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given them. They would conceal all the different, whether it's energy forces, they recognize that it's not by their effort necessarily, but it's really from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Did they have al-fadl? Yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them provisions, gave them certain powers, but they would want to consider that it was really but nothing because of their intelligent behavior, but their intelligent choices, that they were actually just so smart to have it figured out, and you're nothing but stupid to just not know how to do it. And therefore, you would just come and just praise them because it was all about seeing them as God or as the center. So that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَأَعْتَدْنَا لِلْكَافِرِينَ عَذَابًا مُهِينًا. And the Lord Almighty says, well, and these people, they will actually be, remember, the general rule in the fiqh of criminal law is that the punishment is going to be from the same type of behavior. They were acting in full pride, like they were somehow the beyond everyone else. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give them something that is containing al-ihana. What is al-ihana? Humiliation. Therefore, on the other hand, neither Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course, later on, the ayat will speak about the mu'mineen and what they would act in, but this is exposing the wrongdoing in order to keep us from engaging in that. And those that would spend their money, أموالهم رئاء الناس, just in order to get people's attention. In other words, before, not only were يَبْخَلُونَ وَيَأْمُرُونَ النَّاسَ بِالْبُخْلِ, and they would conceal what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given them, but they would actually, there's another type in where they would spend. The first ones are not spending at all. The second ones, they got type 2. These type 2 are really considering themselves as, or their interest as the center, but these people, يُنْفِقُونَ أَمْوَالَهُمْ رِئَاءَ النَّاسِ, they would spend, this is a group 2. Do they spend? Yeah, sure, they'll contribute. But the reason why they're doing it is not for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but this is that they consider. So the type 1 consider themselves as the center. Type 2 consider the people as the center. Type 1 consider themselves as the center. Type 2 considered the people as the center. And وَلَا يُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ وَلَا بِالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ, they don't believe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and not judgment day. Type 2 consider the people as the center. Well, if we don't want to consider ourselves as the center and not the people as the center, what should be the center? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala should be the center. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala should be the center, not the people. Because the second you fear people, you become a coward to abiding by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's principles. You become a coward. Why? Because you're afraid. الذين قالوا لهم الناس وإن الناس قد جمعوا لكم فاخشوهم. When people would start telling them, oh, they're combining, they're actually joining forces against you. Why? It was really nothing but a threat. فزادهم إيمانا. That only added them and increased in their iman. فزادهم إيمانا. What did they say? Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is enough for them. وقالوا حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل. We're not afraid of people. They can gather all the forces. They can gather all the power. They can do whatever they want. We're only afraid of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is enough for us. That's why I see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give victory for Ahl Gaza, because it was never this unified tawheed, unified dhikr. They would be saying, Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakil, every single one. Child, adult, Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakil. They're not adding anything else. Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakil. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah, will be their hasib, will be the one that will be their wakil. Not UAE, not Saudi Arabia, not Egypt, no force. Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakil. Once it's Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakil, then فانقلبوا بنعمة من الله وفضل لم يمسسهم سوء. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and they will, and بنعمة, in a great blessings, وفضل, and even an increase, what would be so abundant, لم يمسسهم سوء, and no harm would then hit them. That's it. Once you would say, إني مغلوب فانتصر. That's it. Let Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you the victory. And that was what وَمَن يَكُنِ الشَّيْطَانُ لَهُ قَرِينًا فَسَاءَ قَرِينًا. Because why qarina? Qarina is supposed to be a dual thing. Let me comment on the qarina a little bit. What is the qarin? Al-qarin. Anybody heard of the qarin? Qarin is not a two angel. Al-qarin. Every single person has a qarin. A qarin is basically a shaitan that is with you all the time. That's al-qarin. What do? Well, they're basically whispering into you to do what is wrong. Every single person. What about the Prophet ﷺ? He didn't defeat it. He basically said, إِلَّا أَنَّ اللَّهَ أَعَانَنِي عَلَيْهِ. There are two narrations. فَأَسْلَمْ or فَأُسْلِمْ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the first narration, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had basically given me the power against them, فَأَسْلَمْ, so I would be protected. And the second narration, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala given me the power and he had become Muslim. فَأَسْلَمْ or فَأُسْلِمْ. Go ahead, my dear.
Sorry, a stupid question, but are they inside us or outside?
We don't really know. Fair enough. We don't really know because there is a hadith. Listen to this. The Prophet ﷺ was walking with Safiya. Oh, walking with Safiya. Who's Safiya? Bint Huyay ibn Akhtab. Oh, she's his wife. Two of the Sahaba were walking past and then they started going faster and faster. So the Prophet ﷺ called them and they said, this is Safiya. This is Safiya. In other words, he wanted to make sure that they didn't think that he was walking with any random woman. So they basically trying to explain themselves that, no, we would never doubt you. So he said, Shaitan runs through the veins of Bani Adam, majra dam. That it goes through the veins of Bani Adam exactly the way that the blood runs through the human being's veins. So some scholars, they took that literally in where they're inside of you. Other scholars, they said no, because it tashbih, in other words, having a simile is not necessarily to mean that is a literal thing. If I were to say Fatmata was as beautiful as a bird or a flower, it doesn't mean she turned into a flower. It's basically comparing beauty with something that is known to be beautiful. So I'd basically do a simile. She's pretty as a flower. Doesn't mean she became a flower, as a flower. Look at some comparisons and basically talk about that. All right. So the first group of scholars, they said that al-qarin, that no, they're actually inside of you. The second group, they said they're not inside of you. Why not? Why would you say they're not inside of a person? They said because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually says, quoting الشيطان, إلا أني دعوتكم ما كان لي عليكم من سلطان إلا أني دعوتكم فاستجبتم لي. I had no power over you, but I had called you and you just responded. ما كان لي عليكم من سلطان. That same ayah was actually the main reason that scholars actually have differences of opinions on whether exorcism is real or not. Interesting, huh? Exorcism, is it real? Is it possible that shaitan can go into a person's body and somehow control their hands, control their movement, control their thinking, control their tongue, and actually speaking different tongues? Is that possible at all? Well, that's where, you could say that some understood it literally and others understood it as a metaphor, that it doesn't mean that they really control your actions or your limbs or your body. So it's a metaphor.
Just whispering.
Just whispering. Is that the preponderant? Is that the preponderant? They just whisper, and how do they actually do the communication? Now, here's one thing: is that the communication that they do is very different than the communication that we would communicate in. In fact, even as human beings, we communicate in different ways, by the way. We communicate in different ways. Ever get a phone call from somebody and they would tell you, oh, I was just thinking about you? Do we only communicate in words, or do we also communicate in different ways? Maybe, I don't know, electro something in our brain, who knows? And how far can it go? You're thinking about somebody and all of a sudden, like, oh, I was actually thinking about you. And they're probably on the other side of the planet. How does that even happen? Oh, how does that even happen? Al-arwah junud al-mujannada? Our souls are junud al-mujannada. They're like, our souls and spirits, they're junud mujannada. Is there anything? At the end of the day, the world is very complex. If the world, and here we go, we can feel ourselves, but then even though this soul is inside of us, but then we can't understand anything about it. How is it that we would be capable of understanding the jinn and the qareen whether it's inside of us? I mean, we know your ruh is inside. You don't doubt that. You still are not capable of figuring out. You're still not capable of figuring it out, let alone a separate being called al-qareen. Let alone separate being called al-qareen. So in that situation, with al-qareen, we would just say it's part of ghaib. What happens to them? Do they die when I die? Or do they go to somebody else? Do they somehow transform into another That's all ghaib. Khalas. We don't actually have any information. For al-qareen, we don't have much information. وَمَاذَا عَلَيْهِمْ لَوْ آمَنُوا بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ. In comparison, if they were to believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Judgment Day, why Allah and Judgment Day? Because once you believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you would contribute in what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told you, the essence that preceded your existence, which is Judgment Day. So the implication of faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to know that you had an essence that in a purpose that preceded your existence, and that you need to contribute towards that. وَأَنفَقُوا. But how do I contribute towards that? Well, start with some spending on what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. But He gave it to me. Why should I spend it? Why should I spend it if He gave it to me? Well, that's because you consider and you recognize that the principle is more important than the material. The principle is more important. It's more valuable. it's more important to recognize than the material. Principle is more important than material. That the value, we value principle more than we value material. So what do we do? In order to get the principle of hospitality, what do? Give away from your money. Give away from your money. You want to be hospitable. You want to be a person of sharing, caring, etc. You gotta give it up. Because once you give it up, that's when the implication is going to be different. The implication, same thing. Al-jaza'u min jins al-amal. Exactly like that. Al-jaza' min jins al-amal. That's what the fiqh of al-uqubat, the fiqh of punishment and criminal law. Al-jaza'u min jins al-amal. That the implication, or at least al-jaza', the punishment, comes from the same type of action. Same thing, whether we're talking about al-jaza' to mean the good reward, or whether we're talking about al-jaza' min jins al-amal to mean al-jaza' to mean the consequence min jins al-amal, from the same type of action. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, well, right there, they were to spend for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They were to actually increase in value, increase in principle. They would increase in what was even more valuable than what they were already given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In other words, they don't actually contain it. It was given them to Allah by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَكَانَ اللَّهُ بِهِمْ عَلِيمًا إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَظْلِمُ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ وَإِن تَكُ حَسَنَةً يُضَاعِفْهَا وَيُؤْتِ مِن لَدُنْهُ أَجْرًا عَظِيمًا. I'm going to read this hadith. This hadith isn't Sahih Muslim. Listen to this, and we're going to end it right there. This hadith is actually a long hadith. حتى إذا خلص المؤمنون من النار فوالذي نفسي بيده ما منكم من أحد بأشد مناشدة لله في استقصاء الحق من المؤمنين الله يوم القيامة. What happened? The Prophet ﷺ said when the believers would finish, in other words, they would pass the bridge of hellfire, and he said, by Allah, there would be none of you that is seeking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to basically getting and reaching justice for the believers than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. On Judgment Day, they would say, they would tell Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya Allah, there are these people, يصومون معنا ويصلون ويحجون فيقال لهم أخرجوا من عرفتم فتحرم صورهم على النار. They would tell Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya Allah, there were these people that are in hellfire. They used to fast with us. They used to pray with us. They used to do hajj with us. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, get whoever you know, in other words, that would abide by these principles and will basically let them not be in hellfire. And then many فَيُخْرَجُونَ خَلْقًا كَثِيرًا. Then many would be will be removed from hellfire. Yet hellfire had already eaten up half of their legs or half of their knees. And then they would say, ثم يقولون ربنا ما بقي فيها أحد مما أمرتنا به فيقول جل وعز ارجعوا فمن وجدتم في قلبه مثقال دينار من خير فأخرجوه. Then they would tell Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya Allah, all that you had ordered us for us, those that we witnessed that they were fasting with us, praying with us, and doing pilgrimage with us, we got them out of hellfire. There's none of those that you had ordered us to expel from hellfire remained. So then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would say, get every single person that has, even if it's as the weight of a dinar, a weight of a coin of good in their heart, get them out of hellfire. Many people would be taken out of their hellfire. Then they would say, Ya Allah, we didn't leave anybody of what you had ordered inside hellfire. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would say, then get فمن وجد ثم يقول ارجعوا فمن وجدتم في قلبه مثقال نصف دينار من خير فأخرجوه. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would tell them, go back. And whoever you would find even half a coin of good inside of them, get them out of hellfire. Then they would be taken out. And they would say, we had not left anybody of what you had said to be there. Then he would say, ثم يقول ارجعوا فمن وجدتم في قلبه مثقال ذرة من خير فأخرجوه. Then he would say, go back. And whoever you would find in their hearts, even a small iota of good, get them out of hellfire. And they would get them out. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ثم يقول ربنا لم نذر فيها خيرا. Then they would go back and say, there's nothing good remaining in hellfire, not even an iota. Look at Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy. This hadith, Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, he said, if you don't believe me in this hadith, then read the ayah, if you will. إن الله لا يظلم مثقال ذرة وإن تك حسنة يضاعفها ويؤتي من لدنه أجرا عظيما. He said, read the ayah, that the Lord Almighty would not abuse or oppress anyone with not even a small weight of a iota or an atom of good deed. And even if it were to be one good deed, the Lord Almighty would multiply it and he would give from his own self the reward, ajran azima, to mean Jannah. Even if it was the smallest amount of iota. And that's that ayah right there. إن الله لا يظلم مثقال ذرة وإن تك حسنة يضاعفها ويؤتي من لدنه أجرا عظيما. We'll stop right there. Go ahead. Fair enough. إن الله لا يغفر أن يشرك به ويغفر ما دون ذلك لمن يشاء. The question was, does it have to be good even if it's a non-Muslim? Good, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that he does not, إن الله لا يغفر أن يشرك به, that he does not forgive anybody associating partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he forgives all the other deeds. And that's why, and in the other hadith, right there, if you continue this ayah, فكيف إذا جئنا من كل أمة بشهيد وجئنا بك على هؤلاء شهيدا يومئذ يود الذين كفروا وعصوا الرسول تسوى بهم الأرض ولا يكتمون الله حديثا. That's the answer to your question. When the Prophet ﷺ was told, how is it when you were to be brought, and every single prophet would come and stand right before, and even with the prophet that they had believed in, and we would come and bring you as a witness on them, that is the mu'mineen, the Muslims. And then on that day, those that had went and neglected and disobeyed the prophet, peace be upon him, and the prophets, they would then wish, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was basically not even an iota of good deed, even if they only were to have an iota of good deed, they would be granted a pardon to be out of hellfire. Then that is when those that had basically went against and disobeyed the prophets and disbelieved in the prophets, that's when they would basically realize that all the good deeds, even if it's the smallest amount, would basically give them the pardon and Jannah, except one thing: shirk and disobeying the prophets. That's when they would wish that the earth would just be لو تسوى بهم الأرض, where they would be basically underneath the ground, and they would not whatsoever deny any of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had sent in ayat. That's to answer your question. And that's why when we're speaking about, well, what about those that had done good? A shirk is not to be forgiven. And there's only one way to seek forgiveness from shirk. And that is before death. You gotta ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, to continue and be faithful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that regards. This is it. This is it. So inshallah, we'll see you all tomorrow. This is going to be our last class, at least in this place. Inshallah, we'll continue online. We won't stop. It has been a very long journey, and I met many, many great people. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just as He had gathered us in this place with malaika surrounding us and very many ayat to learn and study and lots of inspiration that we were part of together. We learned it together. I was not the teacher. I was basically learning it as you were learning. And subhanAllah, this inspiration would come to us together. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just as He had gathered us in this masjid, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us, just as gathering in Masjid al-Rahim, give us His rahmah. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just as He had gathered us together and going through all these ayat, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from those that inna Allah la yadlim mithqala dharratin wa in taku hasanatan yudha'ifha wa yu'ti min ladunhu ajran 'azima. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from those that will get al-ajr al-'azim, and make us from those that would be gathered on Judgment Day in al-Jannah, and make us from those that would be gathered together on khair, on sidq, on repentance, on rahmah, and witness that we had tried all together to actually join together on rahmah, on the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, on the light, and in Masjid al-Rahim. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all rahmah, forgiveness, and light. Allahumma ameen. We're not going to end. Inshallah, we will be continuing until we finish all the Quran together, even if we are going to be beyond many seas and many oceans. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, remember, He's capable of combining all the lights despite all the seas and oceans, despite all the distances. The sun is the farthest, yet we would get its light in 8 minutes. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gather us not only today, but gather us, Allahumma ya Allah, in Jannah, and gather us in many, many times, inshallah, in not only today, but also in this place, inshallah. Allahumma ameen. And barakallahu fikum. And if there was any mistake, it was basically from me. Any shortcomings, it was from me. Please forgive me if I had said anything and made any mistake. I'm a human being at the end of the day. And at the end of the day, you know, we can try, we can learn with one another, but if the Prophet ﷺ himself had basically given the legacy, we will come, inshallah, to always be continuing the legacy of the Prophet ﷺ. It doesn't end here. And barakallahu fikum. You know, I don't want to cry. You know, when we started out, Gems of Light, before even that, yes, I was born here, but then I went to Palestine, alhamdulillah. But then after coming back to the US, every masjid almost. I started out teaching in Masjid al-Huda, and then the masjid, and literally every masjid closed up on us. Where we were 70, 80, and sometimes 100 people in the dars. Then the masajid said, the masjid at least, said, we don't have room in the parking lot. We need you out. Literally, uqsim billahi al-azim. I was in the masjid, and then they said, the masjid's president, whatever, wants to have a talk with you. And I go and I said, they told me you wanted to have a talk with me. And he said, yeah, we have to end your dars today. You can't continue. We closed the dars. We ended the dars. There was no place. And then we basically started doing it in my own home. And then later Noura suggested, wait a minute, why don't we make our own nonprofit organization? Why don't we start our own place? And alhamdulillah, when we were basically kicked out of the masajid, right now, getting invitations nationwide just this month, I got almost 12 invitations from different masajid in the US just this month. New York, California, Virginia, Canada, and different states, Texas, the list goes on and on. But we won't stop, because ilm is not confined in a place. Ilm is not confined in a place. Ilm is in the hearts. Ilm is in the heart, is in the mind. Ilm is the light that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَيَعَلِّمْكُمُ اللَّهُ. Have the taqwa and you'll get the ilm. Even when you're kicked out of a place, you remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that you turn to. The masjid, even if it doesn't invite you, even if the masjid expelled you, remember, you correct what is in the masjid because it's your home. You don't wait for the masjid to embrace you, because you recognize that the masjid, وَأَنَّ الْمَسَاجِدَ لِلَّهِ, al-masajid are for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what do? فَلَا تَدْعُوا مَعَ اللَّهِ أَحَدًا. Don't worship other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They can expel you, but you recognize, if you do it for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, al-ikhlas istiwa al-madh wa al-dhamb. Ikhlas and true sincerity is when, whether put downs or praise to you, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Continue. It doesn't matter whether people praised you or whether put you down, because you recognize you do it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We don't have the people at our center. The people are not our center. And we are not the center. Who's the center? وَاعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَلَا تُشْرِكُوا بِهِ شَيْئًا. That's the center. That's the center. It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not the people. Not the people. And they can ostracize you from the masjid. But that's where we called it gems of light. Even when there's no place, but we'll basically continue the gems of light, whether it's the ilm itself from the Quran, sunnah, fiqh, in order to bring about light, to bring about the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to carry the legacy. That's gems of light. Inshallah, we will continue the gems of light, carrying the gems of light until we make these gems of light from a word that would be in our hearts to a word of action that would radiate all around us from our homes, from the women's homes, where they would actually radiate it on their children and on their spouses. That was the dream. Many would say, well, why don't you have men involved? Why don't you? They've got their corners, but I know you don't have you don't have the corners always when it's men's corners. We don't necessarily need to have men always with us all the time. We need to have our women's corner. Let's make our women's corner, but it doesn't mean that I ostracize the men, because I understand that my father is a man, my husband is a man, I have a brother. We definitely don't believe in that feminist thing, not feminist rhetoric, because to us, we make family. Gems of Light is about making family. وَاعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَلَا تُشْرِكُوا بِهِ شَيْئًا. It's about worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's our center, not the people, not ourselves, but it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we carry the legacy of light and we radiate it on our children, on our husband, and on our family, and in the whole society at large. وَلَا يَكْتُمُونَ اللَّهَ حَدِيثًا. Basically, yes, that was talking about the kafirin, but we can right there also, I guess, expose it, put it within the context. We don't basically deny Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's wordings. Yes, walaiktumullah hadith was actually mentioned in a different context, but we don't whatsoever hide the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's it. So this is it. And barakallahu feekum, inshallah. Allah yahfadak ya Rabbi. Oh, beautiful. Oh, I love these hearts, these emojis. Yeah, definitely. I absolutely love them. You can put them. Allah yahmiku ya Rabbi. We're not the same state. You definitely will be missed. Allah yahfadak ya Rabbi. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I don't know you a lot, but I think Allah found you in the group and continue what you do. Inshallah, we will continue. We're not going to stop. And I would also say, I want you all. Yes, we will be now launching, inshallah, the academy, hopefully, inshallah, in February. So by then I should be situated, inshallah, in our new place, Malaysia. Excited. I don't know really what I'm going to encounter, but regardless of what we encounter, inshallah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give us, make dua for us, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would give us a place where we would have a stable place and a place that would radiate on our children and radiate the ilm and embrace Islam and continue doing that. We are trying, the only reason why I'm leaving all the good that we have in this state and or even in America is really because of the fear that our children might lose their Islam living in a city of ظالم أهلها, in a city that its people have oppressed themselves. Allah al-Musta'an. And I love this flower. I don't know how they can do it. Ameen ya Rabbi. Go ahead, my dear.
So, I know that you're leaving, but I feel like coming to Tafsir class has really helped boost a lot of people's iman. So now that when you leave, how can you?
My sister Maryam, inshallah, she's gonna be in person. You will love her. Maryam, my sister, is actually specialized in Quranic studies. She has multiple ijazas through Walid al-Manisi and Hatim al-Tamimi, Dr. Hatim al-Tamimi. She was actually the highest in university, and she has a master's degree in Quranic studies, and she has a number of different ijazas in al-Quran, in al-Jazariya, Shatibiyya, etc. from Walid al-Manisi. So she would actually be, inshallah, a great asset. Inshallah, she will definitely be a person that is very, I would say, smart, intelligent, creative. MashaAllah, has nahsabuha ala khair. And I hope she's not listening to this, but I'll tell you a secret. Don't tell her I said this. Okay? Don't tell her I said this. You tell her I say this, I'll kill you all. That's it. Come back. I had a dream. So I'm, like you know me, a bossy person, right? You all know that. All right. This is, shh, don't tell anybody. Okay. All right. So I had a dream that all of a sudden I'm in Jannah. Or sorry, no, that's a different dream. That I'm all of a sudden in this place. And I said, where's my sister Maryam? And these tall men dressed in white are standing, which for some reason that these men are in charge. And I said, where's my sister Maryam? How dare she goes without giving me any notice that she's leaving? 11 years or 12 years between me and my younger sister Maryam. I'm the boss. So I said, where is she? And they just stay quiet and just look at me. And then I get angrier and angry and I say, where is she? How can she go without giving me a notice? I'm supposed to be the person in charge here. And they said one thing. في مقعد صدق عند مليك مقتدر. That she's sitting at a throne next to the great royal highness, the great royal magnificence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Don't tell her I leaked this information. Wallahi nahsabuha ala khair. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give her good health and give her forgiveness and grant her, inshallah, the ability to convey the ilm. She's, mashallah, nahsabuha ala khair. And inshallah, she will continue and you will love her very much. She's a very, very innocent person with great ilm, very smart. She's going to get there, you know, a little bit. Maybe the words are going to be challenging. In the beginning, English was not the first language. Like my English was basically the first language because I was born here. She was born here, but she didn't actually go to school here, but I did. But inshallah, she will grow and you will grow with her. So inshallah, you'll grow together. All right. She's a great teacher. And she will, one thing she has that I really envy her, structure. I don't know structure. I get off the topic. No, she knows but nothing but structure. She's very structured, very intelligent, and she will be with you. Memorize. Did you review this? She'll take you back in your memory and she'll take you back into your studies. Inshallah, she will be, we want both of you, inshallah. Inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I'll continue. Inshallah, I'll continue. Rabbi yahfadhku jami'an, and see you all tomorrow. We're really excited. Oh, Maryam is going to be starting, I don't know if it's next week or the following week, but you know, within this time. And by the way, tomorrow we have a couple of great surprises. Join us tomorrow. Stay tuned. All right. And if anybody would like to say anything, go ahead. I'm going to allow you to unmute. Look at Noura. She's telling me to hurry up. Yeah, that was Noura. Always telling me to hurry up, right? If somebody wants to unmute themselves really quick, we've got a minute or something. Go ahead.
Go ahead, sister.
Go ahead, my dear.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And this is Sister Warda. I really enjoyed the tafsir. Jazakallah khair, sister. I'm going to meet you. I feel like it. I'm going to move with you, same city you're moving, inshallah. I'm moving somewhere, but I don't know exactly. But hope you the best. Inshallah ta'ala. Jazakallah khair. Yeah, and I'm glad you continue for the tafsir. Jazakallah khair. May Allah make you the best place, inshallah.
May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us sincerity, grant us ilm, grant us the application of what we know, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive our sins, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us of those that mutahabbeen fillah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where we love each other for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, despite not being in the same place, but may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from those that ijtama'u alayhi wa tafarraqu alayhi, that gathered in the name, in the love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and even departed on the love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rabbi yahfadhik. Matina, go ahead, my dear.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Habibiti, I'm so used to it to listen to you. I'm so sad to hear that you're leaving. Where are you going?
Should we tell her?
Why are you hiding from me?
Malaysia, inshallah.
Malaysia?
Yes.
So you're
I
gonna
go in Malaysia.
you're gonna do Zoom from there?
Yes, inshallah.
Inshallah. Because
It's going to be tropical. It's not going to be as cold as Minnesota. So I think in a tropical place, I think the internet would probably better because here it kind of freezes, right?
I'm in California, not in Minnesota.
Oh, that girl's in Sunshine State right there. Sunshine State is Florida's or Californian. They're both Sunshine. Okay, there we go.
We don't have rain in summer though. Alhamdulillah. No rain and
Alhamdulillah.
no snow. Alhamdulillah.
No rain and no snow. Oh no, you guys are really, what do they call that? They're really embroiled,
All the
really,
cities.
you know.
No,
all
not
the
boiling.
cities,
We're
wow.
not boiling. No, it's
You
not
don't boil there?
100 degree. Sometimes it's triple digit, but not more than 105. Not
Not more than
rare,
105?
very rare. No, very rare triple digit. Very few days. Otherwise, good.
All right. Well, you never
Weather
know.
is
We never know. Maybe inshallah we'll meet. You know,
Inshallah.
in Palestine we say, you know, a mountain and a mountain can never meet, but human and human can meet. Inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will gather us in this dunya and even in the akhirah. Allahumma ameen. We'll see you all.
Ameen, ameen.
Ameen, ya
Wherever you
Rabbi.
go, Habibiti, may Allah with you. And you
Rabbi
gave us
yahfazka.
so much knowledge, so much knowledge. I love to listen to your lecture, Habibiti. I love it.
Rabbi yahfazk.
I was
And
sad
you were
to
all a
hear
great Oh, alhamdulillah.
but I hope we listen to you, inshallah. Inshallah. Give us
Inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Aysha.
Wa alaikum
Jazakallah
assalam.
khair,
Go ahead,
Habibiti.
my dear.
Oh, subhanallah. Honestly, I feel so sad that you're leaving, but all I will say is to pray to Allah to make your transition easy. May Allah bless your family, continue to increase you in knowledge so that the way you are imparting us, may Allah not deprive you of the reward. Jazakumullah khairan.
وإياكم and ربي يحفظكم جميعا and inshallah see you all tomorrow inshallah. All right, salamu alaikum. And yeah, we really kept those girls, ya haram. Now their husbands, they're going to be like, wait a minute, it's supposed to be gems of light.